What's up, guys? It is Modern Craftsman Monday, and this week
Is it Monday already?
It is Monday already.
I feel like that was a fast week. So who do we have on this week?
Spencer Lewis. A lot of people reached out about him and getting him on. So we did the professional thing, and we scheduled him in advance, 2 hours before the show.
Does anyone know who Spencer Lewis is?
Insider Carpentry.
Okay.
He is a single-man show carpenter, and if you guys are already following him, you guys know how incredibly talented he is as a carpenter, but it's really interesting to see him share more than just his carpentry knowledge, his process, his efficiency, his business, and how he runs, a successful company, but also talks about the challenges of being a one-man show, and the experiences he's had being an individual, but also bringing on a helper, which the helper story is actually quite funny as to why he brought him on.
It's nice to get a little peek into his market as well, because we look at it as him being this single-handed carpenter, an anomaly, but that's a lot of his market that he's competing against.
Which was super interesting to learn.
Yeah.
It's
a good one.
Whenever you're alone in a house listening to podcast trimming, a long podcast is nice.
Sure.
It just helps pass the time a lot better. It really does.
Yeah, I used to work alone a fair amount, and I still do enjoy alone days, but I don't know if I could do it every single day.
Yeah, I get that a lot, but it takes a rare personality type, I think, to be okay with it. But honestly, I love it.
Yeah.
Do you go back and forth between music and podcasts, or is it all podcasts?
Yes,
yeah,
absolutely. Yep. Go back and forth a lot between silence, podcasts, and music, and you just get burnt out on one, move on to the next one.
See, silence, I remember, like, specifically when I was working alone, anytime it was silent was when I was beyond tired, and I probably drank a Red Bull or something, and my brain just forgot that I didn't have noise, and it would just be like super quiet, and I would just be working.
Yeah.
And you zone out.
I'll go silent usually whenever it's something that I don't want to screw up.
Oh, interesting.
Like if I'm going on a staircase and I just need to think things through and not screw something up, I'll turn everything off and just focus.
I can relate to that. I turn the radio down when I'm trying to figure out where I'm driving.
Yeah. Yep.
I feel like I can't type with music on.
See,
if I'm trying to draft an email or something like that, I really have trouble. Anything else, I feel like I have to have something else going on.
Yeah, I think as long as the music I'm listening to doesn't have words, I can type. But if it's got words and lyrics, then yeah, I tend to I can't type and listen to that.
Yeah. I wouldn't know because I don't send hardly any emails. The other thing about my job is it's very light on paperwork, bookwork, anything.
So how are you structured? So Spencer, by the way, we just roll into this. I don't know if you realize that.
No, I had no idea.
Oh yeah, no, we're rolling. We're rolling, man. There's no formal intro. We just go with it.
Good deal.
Yeah, you got a little blush there.
Well, it took me off guard. I'll say that.
No, it's easier that way. I mean, I guess we could tell you that we're going to kind of roll into it, but hopefully you forget about it, and then it's just halfway through it, you're like, oh wait, so this is the podcast. Or the entire time you're sitting there like, man, it's going to be 2 hours after this. Yeah, it's going to be a long podcast.
Now that you say that, it makes more sense because I feel like a lot of the other podcasts you caught other guys off guard too.
It's our jam, man. We just do.
All right. That's all right.
But light on the paperwork. Why? There's so many questions I have for you. I'm sure Tyler does as well. And Tyler's really good at asking the smart questions, and I'm just the dumb questions. But what is your structure like?
Structure is just a one-man show, working for builders, and usually just 3 or so builders. And like last year, I actually only worked for one builder all year. So like I literally sent an invoice to no one besides one builder last year. So with that being the case, There's very few estimates. Like I did, I think 7 or 8 estimates last year, all year. That's it. So the communication, you're not running around chasing jobs that aren't going to follow through. You're not having wasted conversations and stuff like that. It's just I would say it's kind of what I preach all the time. It's just a very efficient model. To me, it's like, I want to be doing what I do best, when I like doing best, which is being on the tools, not doing paperwork. So
why are the builders choosing you?
You'd have to ask them.
We got the wrong guy on the podcast.
Yeah. There's definitely, I work for different types of builders, and each one has their own, I would say, niche or specific things that they want out of a trim subcontractor. I work for production builders who they give you the specs, you show up, you trim, you go home. It's very transactional, and they've got project managers. They don't need your help on anything besides nailing up trim. And then at the higher level, you've got builders who will utilize design, where you're more interactive with the customers, that require a higher level of integration in their system, so that you're working with other subcontractors to make details come together. Paperwork and communication, clarity, those are bigger things to some builders than others as far as the value they place on that. So like putting together an estimate that's clear and concise and easy to understand versus the other guy who's like scribbling it on a piece of paper and sending it in, that's value.
You don't think, if my internet's spotty, I may have to switch rooms, so just let me know if I keep timing out, either of you. You don't think that most contractors are hiring you either because of price point, because of efficiency, quality? You have like different builders who are hiring you for different things that you bring to the table?
I would say so. Yeah. And I'm aware of that whenever I go to work for different builders. I know for some, quality is a more important thing than others. For others, price is a more important thing.
Are you adjusting according to that request? Because outside looking in, I see that you're putting out the same quality, in all the projects, no matter what. And I guess you mentioned production builder, and I guess my biggest question is, what is, and I think I'm elaborating on Tyler's question. As a production builder, let's talk about price. Is the quality something that I'm going to dance around this a little bit. Is the quality something that they care enough about where they're paying you more to do it? Or is your price point equal to the other guy and they're just getting a better quality out of you at the same price point?
Like in my case, I would say the quote unquote production builders that I've worked for, the really big thing there for me is more schedule.
Mm-hmm.
You have to show up, like the one I'm thinking of, like they literally have their schedule so dialed in that they'll tell you 3 months in advance when you're going to be on that job, and it'll be ready for you the day that they said it was 3 months ago. And you have to finish it that day, the day that they say. And usually they give you, like I was doing the size houses, they give you a week to trim a house.
Yep.
It's, to me, that was very stressful, but at the same time, I don't have to spend any time talking to that customer.
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting a packet of trim specifications sent to me in advance, and you drive to the job and you go to work. So that affects the price point for me in the way that I don't have as much time involved, so I can charge less.
Mm-hmm.
And then for a builder, they might, some builders are more organized on the job site than others. I might be running into challenges that I have to take care of, and I might not mind taking care of it, but you just realize some are going to require more of your time than others,
so to
get things right.
The guy that reaches out, hey, Spencer, 3 months from today, this house is going to be ready. Are you putting, at some point you're putting together an estimate or a proposal?
Interestingly, that builder, I never ever once gave them an estimate.
So it's just time and material.
No, not even time and material. I just bill them the same as I would bill anybody else. And I always just sent them an invoice and they paid it, never said a word about it.
So how are you billing though? If it's not time, is it piece count? I mean,
yeah,
yeah, go ahead.
Piece rate, square footage, in homes like that, I wasn't getting into very many, you might get a mantle, a little bit of crown, but otherwise, I've moved to more where I'm charging like for windows per unit and per linear foot of base.
Yep.
But whenever I started, I would actually charge per square foot for doors, base, and case.
That's crazy.
Yeah. It actually isn't too bad if you're doing the production style houses because they're so similar.
Right. It's when you get into the custom where a square foot you can't.
But I found then once I was using that system on my higher end homes, like $1.5 million home that has 1,000 windows in it, like it didn't work.
Yeah.
So then I started moving to counting each window and each door, and that's more fair to everybody on that type of home.
So you're looking at per window. All right, this is I'm kind of walking through the process. You're looking at, all right, that window is going to take me an hour to do, this much material. Are you buying material?
No.
Okay, so
it's labor only.
So labor, consumables, right? Nails, glue, stuff like that. That's how much that window is going to cost me. So I'm going to charge X amount. And then from there, because, I follow you on Instagram and I'm seeing like everything that you, beyond what you do on a daily basis, everything that you do is to increase efficiency. So if you said, hey, this window is going to be 2 hours and I'm charging $50 an hour, so I'm going to charge $100 per hour, you're then basically selling at 100, and I'm putting words in your mouth, correct me if I'm wrong, and then saying, all right, now how do I do that in an hour? Like, how do I become more efficient at that window where I can, continue to sell at that price or be more competitive by dropping the price?
Right. Yeah, exactly. And some things with new construction trimming, you're going to realize, like, for example, baseboard is something I actually charge different amounts of money for different things, just because I realize for me as a one-man show, I'm making a choice to be a one-man show. And if I try to charge some supreme rate for awesome baseboard installation, that's just ridiculous.
Sure.
Because it's baseboard, it can only be so good. And no one cares, number one, anybody should be able to install baseboard pretty well. And then you're going to reach a ceiling on your skill level where you're just not going to get any faster installing baseboard. You get your material staged in the right spot. You got your saw set up. You're cutting 35 pieces at a time, a whole level at a time, nailing it off. You're just not going to get faster. So there's a certain level where it just is what it is kind of how I look at it. But then there are other things where you can really innovate and find better, faster ways to do things. And that's where you can become a lot more profitable. And then also I look a lot to, like, as a one-man show and being a younger guy, to be able to do certain things where my competitor might have 2 guys doing it, like a coffered ceiling or something like that, where if you can do it in the same amount of time by yourself, then you can do pretty well.
I think the one that sticks out to me is the beams with the arch, the arch, right?
Yeah.
It's like, I'm watching.
I was pretty proud of that.
You should be. I mean, I'm watching it. I'm like, this kid's working alone. He's not, he's not throwing it up there and, all right, that's good. It's 20 feet up. It's fine. Scribing it, sanding it, finishing it, bringing it to a level where it's, at a quality that is probably not even appreciated.
Right. Absolutely.
Do you feel like you run into that a lot with this style? And if, and does it even matter to you that a lot of these finer intricacies that you do are underappreciated?
Well, for one thing, that like the main builder I work for, he follows me on Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say
he's making sure you're going to hit your schedule. That's what he's doing.
Well, you can check up on. It's kind of like you can almost like not even have to have a project manager. You can just get on Instagram and see what I got done.
He's saving. Yeah, he's saving $75,000 a year because you're posting it.
I mean, really, it is kind of, but then a lot of those details that nobody sees, but we appreciate as craftsmen and you know the trades community on Instagram. Whenever a builder sees that, I think they realize how much of a deeper level is actually going into the product we're trying to give them than they would see, you know, at face value. So that's one way. You know, I think that is appreciated, you know, to an extent.
Sure.
But then I also realize there's a fine line. You know, one of the phrases I always use is nobody cares.
Right.
Because there is just a line where nobody cares. And in this business, if you don't know where that line is at, where there's not a discernible difference to the client, then you're just either wasting their money or your money.
Yeah.
One of the two.
I'd say I have a hard time personally finding that line a lot, where I'm constantly trying to do something better or be more innovative. And with that being said, I think we're also incredibly fortunate where there's a lot of clients that are looking for that, mm-hmm. And they're, ultimately willing to pay for it. But the fact that they're willing to, or they're asking for what sometimes could be an unrealistic expectation. And I look at that as a challenge, and I love that. But, mm-hmm. I think you're right. There's a lot. If you don't know that line and you don't have the clientele that's going to support that, it becomes expensive.
Yeah.
I also think with the carpentry as well, it takes a certain amount of time to get to that like 90% mark. And then it could take that same amount of time or twice as much to get to that 100%. Where at the end of the day, if you're not getting paid for that, your customers aren't willing to pay for that. You're either going to price yourself out of the water or just lose money.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a really big thing to be successful in subcontracting. I feel like is to know there's that line there where there's just no discernible difference to anybody. And I go over that line all the time, but there's also points in time where, hey, this baseboard piece didn't quite fit perfectly, but the reality is in 3 days, the painter is going to be here and it is not going to matter. That's the reality of subcontracting, unfortunately, but you got to try and find that spot.
So you were doing remodeling before
mm-hmm.
trim carpentry, right?
Yep.
So, I want to get into that a little bit, but I also want to know, when you first went this route to go be basically a one-man show finished carpenter doing full houses, what was the reaction of builders when you would either tell them what you're doing or show up and then be like, all right, where's everyone else?
Well, it didn't really go that way. I'd say I grew into that. I kind of came into subcontracting backwards. The highest end home that I ever worked on was my first house trimming. I was remodeling, like you said, and I got a call from somebody who was needing trim help. It was about probably a $3 million house. It was a $250,000 trim package. And around here, whenever you get that size of homes and trim packages, it's usually multiple crews. I shouldn't even say crews, multiple subcontractors that get brought in together and thrown into the house, because usually one crew is, I could get into that. I don't know if I should or not, but
you should.
Okay. So what happens is, if you're going to have, let's say if I'm going to have 3 employees, I'm going to need steady work. That means I'm going to have a builder or 2 that are keeping me going steadily. And they're probably building homes with modest trim packages. So then around here, we don't get these just crazy expensive $5 million homes all the time. But then whenever one of them comes along, you need it trimmed, and the builder needs to find a trim sub. Well, the guys who have 3 employees, they have their builders that they have to keep taking care of. And if they walk away to go be on this $5 million house for 4 months, who's taking care of their bread and butter?
Mm-hmm.
You know, it doesn't work. So what I've found is actually on these really big high-end jobs, they end up bringing in all kinds of labor that actually a lot of times they aren't even trim subcontractors. They might be remodelers who are good at trim, some one-man shows and whatnot, but that's how it usually works. So that's what happened to me on my first house. Got called, went in, it was like heaven on earth. It was just trim, millwork, you know, on racks everywhere, just my dream. So I actually spent over 4 months on that house.
So are these houses, like a job like this, just price point market, is the square footage absurd on this, or is the trim package absurd, or a combination of the two?
On that type of home, both, everything was absurd.
Because I feel like a $5 million house where you are would be nice, but also it'd be massive.
Yeah, that one actually, square footage wise, was not that massive. It was a lake home. They bought 2 lots on probably the most expensive lake in Indiana. Their lots were about between the two of them were $2 million. You know, and they put a decent sized home, but just everything was massive and expensive on it. Yeah, it's not very many $250,000 trim packages that you get around here. So we don't see that a whole lot.
So that's how you kind of came into it, was getting hired basically to help trim this house out.
Yeah. So I was one of multiple subcontractors there, and I just tried to grab every high-end detail that I could. And just, you know, it was kind of,
what do you mean by that? You just try to grab every high-end detail. Were you with the like group of different people kind of gathered? Mm-hmm. There was no structure as, all right, Spencer, you're going to do this, and Gary, you're going to be focused on this. You guys just went in there and kind of picked what you wanted and went at it?
Yeah, it was kind of a disaster.
That's crazy.
Draw straws.
So what happens is a lot of times a builder will land one of these jobs, and they're not used to this kind of house. It's way out of their ability range.
They're reaching out to everyone. It's like, hey, I need someone to do everything.
Yeah. And so what I actually ended up doing the first couple of weeks I was there, I was taking down doors that the first trim crew installed, because the first trim crew got fired, you know?
Yep.
And so then they were scrambling, trying to find guys. And so kind of got started, you know, putting some doors in, and they didn't know me. So, but they got to see the tools, they got to see how I used them, how I was working, got to know me. And as it progressed, there was some really nice challenging trim details in that house. And so I would just ask, you know, hey, after I get this done, mind if I take that one? And you mind if I take that one? And I was super greedy. But no, the other guys that were there didn't care. Sure. They were kind of older subs, and, you know, it just wasn't really, and it was challenging stuff. But to me, it was an opportunity and a lot of fun. So after I got through that, I had made connections with an interior designer and the millwork supplier. And so then my name went out. My next job, a builder called me after that. The first house I did was a decent trim package, probably like, I don't know, $25,000 of labor. And I trimmed it with another guy. So like his one-man show, it was too big for him, this builder's usual subcontractor. So we actually trimmed it together. And from there, it just kind of kept picking up houses. And I wanted to make that transition from remodeling to new construction. And it took probably a year and a half until I was completely new construction, and just kind of kept picking up builders along the way.
So your goal with that would be, you're not dealing with homeowners as much, probably less tools, less pack down, breakup, set up inside houses, better ability to be working and creating the efficiency in the processes with just yourself doing basically a certain trade.
Yeah, specializing. The riches are in the niches. That's where it's at. So I had all the tools to do everything, painting, tile, drywall. Like I was the full service remodeler. That was my tagline for my business, was the full service remodeler. But it's just really hard to be profitable as a one man show, at least for me. It was okay, but it wasn't just great or anything. And I really wanted to trim. I don't know. I just kind of wanted to do that. So I made that transition, and it's been good, at least so far. I wonder some days, but
are you able to stay like staged on a job with all your tools and stuff, or are you pulling like offloading every day?
No, I know some guys pack up every day because they have to. All of my big stuff I leave out, and then usually I'll deadbolt a closet.
Yeah.
I try to keep everything on wheels, so it's really easy to wheel it in and out, but everything's insured though. A lot. I know I hear stories all the time of guys getting their tools ripped off. Like, I couldn't sleep at night if I didn't have full coverage on my tools.
Right.
Yeah. That makes sense, because I feel like the hardest part about working by yourself, there's a lot of difficult parts, but what you don't want to be doing is loading and unloading. And it's like, I would pay somebody to just load and unload my stuff and be like, all right, whatever I get between those other 7-6 hours, I'm fine with. But I feel like that's the worst thing, especially if you had to unload on jobs like that. That would take probably half a day between gathering all your stuff and then packing it out.
Yeah, it's funny because I just sent an estimate this morning, and I have a line item in my estimates buried for basically tool deployment and pack up, and I figure 6 hours. So 3 to unload and 3 to load up. I don't get a lot of time involved in it. So.
With all right, so I'm going to ask about the numbers. So what if you get that job and then you need to pack up multiple times? Like, what if that 6 hours that you're estimating goes over? Are you charging more, or is it it's fixed price?
Once I send a quote, that's what it is, unless somebody really does something to screw that up. But the thing about trimming is everyone is waiting on you.
Right.
Like, the painter cannot start until you're gone. So I couldn't tell you if I've even ever left a job once I've started it.
Sure.
Once you're there, you're going to finish it.
Yeah, Tyler, I think that's the natural progression of where, when I started hiring people, is that I would spend all this time unpacking and packing and packing up. And unlike Spencer, I was, trying to do too many things at once. So I was packing up all my stuff at the end of the day. And it would be, a half hour in the morning, if not maybe longer, from the time I got there to the time I was set up. And then the same thing at the end of the day. And that's when I was like, I need to hire someone. Same thing, like Tyler said, I don't care what you do during the day, just like get stuff, clean up, whatever.
Yeah.
But the biggest thing I need you to do is unpack and pack up.
The problem is, especially if you're working in people's homes where it's occupied by the homeowners, you then have to clean up on your way out. So even days where I don't have somebody, where it's like, all right, I'll work to my normal time, and then I'm there till 7:30 at night because I didn't realize that I'm going to have an hour of packing stuff up, rolling up tarps, cleaning up, vacuuming, and then it's like another hour by the time I get everything out to my truck, which it adds on to every day. I feel like and at that point you're done with the day. You just want to get home and you're just watching the clock like tick, and you're like, I have so much more stuff to do.
Yeah. That's the beauty of new construction. What I love about it is you can literally work anytime you want. I mean, whether it's 3 o'clock in the morning, 1 o'clock at night, to get done with the job, there's nobody there pushing you. And if you want to leave tools out and leave it a mess, it's really not a big deal.
Tyler, I feel like you guys are similar in the sense that, well, obviously, Spencer, you started remodeling and shifted towards trim, but Tyler, could you ever see yourself focusing on, one niche?
If I were to focus on one thing, it would probably be trim.
Yeah. I think that's what I feel like a lot of people, that's what we all get the most excited about.
Yeah. I always liked it. And I think that realistically, I think the reason that I enjoy trimming, I do like the tools. I think that they're neat tools. It's fun. It makes the impact of trimming something is huge. I also think that for me, it was very low risk and low anxiety because you're doing tile work and stuff can leak. You're working with thin set that's drying out. Is it too dry? Is it set up? Should I mix more? Should I clean? It's relatively clean, like it's dusty, but you don't have crap all over your hand. Like trim, the worst thing that could happen for me would be an errant nail strike something. But my biggest mistake or my biggest issue would be that I'd have to rip something down and fix it. And it was never like, I'm going to leave the house and something's going to be leaking for the next 3 years and there's going to be mold in the walls. So I always liked it when I first started out because I could figure it out. And I knew that no matter how badly I screwed it up, it wouldn't cost me a ton of money.
Yeah, it's very true on trim. It's not mechanical at all. I have hit things with nails, never any major issues, but otherwise, like warranty wise, your biggest thing is going to be expansion and contraction, screwing something up with paint, but otherwise there's not hardly anything you can do to really screw up a house.
Yeah. That's I think why I kind of started liking it. And then I don't know, maybe it's always just that it's that stage in the game where drywall's up, you're primed, things are cleaner, and you're starting, it's starting to get towards the finishes of the job. That's fun for me. But I'm doing it for like 2 days or 3 days. I don't know what that would look like if I was Spencer and
You cut out there for a second.
I said I'm only doing it for like 2 days. So I don't know what that would look like if I did it every single day.
Yeah. I think the other thing, a lot of people sometimes you see the finished pictures on a nice custom home and it looks really nice, but I don't think everyone always realizes the monotony of thousands of feet of baseboard and casing and smashing drywall around window jambs and just all that stuff that's part of every job that goes into it. That it is very repetitive too.
Yeah, I think that's the same thing. Again, when I'm going in trimming something, it's a matter of a couple of days. And by the end of it, I'm like, okay,
You're still losing audio, Tyler. Sorry.
All right, let me switch into my other room.
Okay. You have a lot to share, and you share it, you're sharing it constantly and different sides of it, talking about being a production trim carpenter, talking about how you're increasing efficiency in the shop, talking about the methods that you use actually building things. That's the progression of, for instance, we'll talk about social media. My social media has been less and less of me involved. It used to be me belt on talking about what I was building. And now, fast forward 4 years, I'm mainly in the office and building the company. And I'm trying to get on site and share what's going on site. And hiring Doug full time to get video is a way to showcase my guys rather than me. And it's been an interesting, adaptation to my company and the way we promote and share. But I always there's a big part of me that misses just putting the belt on.
Oh yeah.
Like I Johnny always says to be Tommy Silver and wake up every day and be like, do I want to work today or do I want to just boss people around?
Yeah.
And I do feel that way. I'm fortunate in the sense that I actually really genuinely love the business side of it and building a business and building a team and, I love trim carpentry, but I also really love the project management side of building a house, and I want to continue to make that as complex as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Like, my goal is to build the most, not necessarily complex homes, but the most extraordinary homes.
Mm-hmm.
And do it in ways that isn't typical. Not, maybe it's not traditional. Maybe it's like, I like ultra contemporary, which has no trim in it.
Yeah.
But there's a level of execution that is borderline,
It's way harder.
Yeah, it's borderline, just, not impossible, but unreasonable.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the word modern is so wrongly used in today's world. It's like, oh, it's a modern renovation. It's like, no, it's 1x4 casing. Just because it doesn't have a profile to it doesn't mean it's modern. Like, that's simple.
Yeah.
Like, it's, but that's where my head's at. But at the same time,
what did I miss?
Nothing. We were just we were trying not to go down a rabbit hole, but you know me, I just talk. No, we were talking about, how I think Spencer has an interesting approach to, the way he teaches, and he teaches so many things, and he talks about business and being a production trim carpenter, and then his methods of working alone, and then his methods of how he builds things in the shop, and then the efficiency. Just, there's a lot of different things, and I started talking about how, through social media's eyes, I started as a carpenter, and I would share my story and what I was doing on a daily basis with the belt on. Fast forward 4 years, now I basically am in the office most of the time building the company, and I'm trying to share what we're doing from a technical side through the eyes of my guys, and sharing when I get on site, which I don't get to as much as I could.
Yeah.
And how a big part of me would love to put the belt back on and do that every day, but the equal parts to that, and probably more now, is building the company and going after something much greater than wearing a belt. And I think that was it was a hard, I want to say it was a hard transition, but I guess it wasn't. It was just different. And now my goals are, much larger. I'd love to be able to put the belt back on when I felt like it worked. I thought I was going to do that with the office renovation, and I did not.
Yeah.
Like, at all.
Well, it might surprise some people, but I used to really like Finish Point Trim, the company.
Yeah.
That was kind of like the company that I idolized.
Yeah, I think a lot of us did.
Yeah, getting into trim work, and I looked at that, and it was like, I want that. But then I think as you grow, number one, you realize the reality is, in my market, that doesn't work. But then also, somewhere along the way, you start to realize your own personality type also, and what suits you best. And like, for me, I just realized, like, at least at this point in time in my life, that is not what I want at all.
Well, you had an employee a couple of years ago, right?
Yeah, nothing serious.
Did you kill him?
No. Funny story. How I got my first employee, that first house I did that had the huge trim package. So they called me and wanted help. And I said I wouldn't work for less than $50 an hour. And that was way too low even then, but that was kind of where I drew the line. And they came back and said, well, they were doing a cost plus time and materials deal where they were billing out their labor at $40 an hour. So I basically turned down the job, and I said, well, I can't take that. I'm not gonna take the job. And they called back and said, hey, what if we'll pay you the full $40 an hour, and then you get a guy, and he, just a helper, it can be anyone, and then we can bill him out too, and then you can make your other $10 off of him if you find a basic entry level guy. So that's actually how I got my first employee.
Did he know that was his role?
Yeah.
You're coming on so I can make how much money I need to make.
he pretty much figured that out. Whenever I was like, you could just literally stand there. I don't really care what you do. Just no. But he was actually a great kid. So he was 16 at the time, and then ended up, it was just a summer thing. Went back to school, and he ended up coming back a couple years later and worked for me for, I don't know, 4 months or so. But something I've learned about production trim carpeting is you have to have the right personality type or you will hate it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's just like we were talking about before, being alone in a house and, you know, you're just grinding the same old monotonous thing. Like a lot of people have people skills or sales skills, or, you know, they need to be around people, and they're going to be miserable if you try and throw them in a house as a carpenter like that. So I'm very mindful of that. If I try to hire somebody, it's got to be the right personality type.
Was he
just hate it?
Was he that opposite? You know, is that
He
ultimately why he left? Or
he did well with it. If anything, I don't ever want to push somebody into something that is not going to maximize their God-given abilities. And I could see that it was not going to be his career path. So I didn't have people early on in my career who told me necessarily the right things, like, hey, figure out what your strengths are and play on your strengths. And so like with him, I bought him the Strengths Finders 2.0 book, gave him the test. We talked about it. What do you want to do? What do you like? And those commutes back and forth to the job, we would discuss those things. And, you know, so, and he's still not very old, so he's still finding his way. But I could just see that it wasn't going to be a long-term thing. And it also gets into a whole other conversation about what can a person make as an employee in the trim carpentry realm. And for a middle-class guy, I don't know that I could tell him, hey, I'm going to pay you $70,000 a year, and this is going to be a long-term thing, because the reality was it wasn't. So there was that whole part of the equation too. But I definitely believe in just not putting up a front and trying to make something sound better than it is.
Sure.
It's kind of like, you know, move on. Find your lane and charge forward. But this probably isn't it.
Speaking of that, oftentimes it comes up. You mentioned it earlier, is your market, and it's much different than Boston, and I think it's probably different than New Jersey, where Tyler is. But can you speak to that? What does a career in your market in production trim look like financially?
Yeah, so even you sent us the DM as well, basically, that your market isn't $250,000 trim packages. Your market isn't super high-end trim, and that's probably not the majority of the market across the country. I think it'd be nice to touch on that some.
Yeah, and I actually feel like I'm even in a pretty decent market. I mean, there's definitely way, way worse markets to be in, but it is nothing like some of the markets out there. I'd say if you would look at my market and trim subcontracting, it's going to be predominantly one-man shows, or maybe a 55-year-old carpenter with a helper. And there's very, very few guys my age, if any, hardly, who are doing it. So the price is being set. Your going rates in the market are being set by one-man shows who are very lean, very efficient. Guys who don't have shops, they're probably operating out of a pickup truck with a topper on it, which a lot of guys might look down upon. But I've seen a lot of those guys are the most efficient carpenters you can find. They're old school, so they can work with next to nothing for tools and still do a pretty good job. And everything's paid for, so they're not charging a bunch to cover overhead and stuff. So you have that setting kind of the market ceiling on what the rates are. And okay, so you ask yourself, well, what are they making an hour? the reality is maybe $50 an hour. You know, a lot of them are just kind of happy not to have a boss. You know, they got their builders where they kind of, you know, go and do what they want when they want, and it's a good life for them. So they're not really trying to get rich. So then you look at that part of the equation, they're pretty efficient. And then you look, okay, so I want to bring in a 20-year-old who's middle class and thinks he deserves $25 an hour right out of the gate. And what kind of production does he have to produce to match my competitors? That's kind of how I look at it, because if I'm paying him 25, he's really, I feel like, should be producing $75 an hour of production if he wants that nice middle class lifestyle, which just isn't a reality. You don't just hop into this and produce that much. So it's really hard, I feel like, to bring in young guys.
So basically that's somewhat in respect to growing. You're kind of set where you are and the size that you are and the scale that you are, because your market wouldn't necessarily facilitate you bringing on people and paying them $25 an hour to teach them or to invest in them or to train them.
Exactly. And if I was to look at okay, I don't know if that sounds reasonable to you guys. Like, I always kind of go by the 3X rule. If you're paying a guy $20 an hour, his billing rate needs to be 60. Or in my case, for piecework, he needs to produce $60 an hour.
Yeah. So I think a general rule of thumb, if you have all the insurances on somebody, between payroll and workers' comp insurance, all that stuff, it's like your cost is going to be probably 35 to 40% on top of what you're paying them. And then you should be making money on that.
Right. So then you've got your profit and unbillable hours, which there always are. The bigger you get in a company, the more unbillable hours, and then vacation and 401k or whatever, you know, all that good stuff that everybody wants. I think that 3X is pretty reasonable, to reach what they want. So I look at that. Okay, if a young guy needs to be built out at that kind of rate, but then you look at what an efficient one-man show can produce in relation to this young guy, the reality is you could just stay a one-man show and make $200 a year and not have any headaches.
Right.
So it's kind of like, well, why? It's kind of how I look at it.
So I get the question a lot because I self-perform a lot, and I enjoy, just like you, being on the tools. And it's like, what are you going to do long term? You can't do this forever. And I know that the way that I've developed my business, it's basically impossible to scale, but it makes me happy doing what I'm doing right now. And I think that trying to change my business model or try and make something work for the future, I don't know, I feel like I'm forcing it at that point, and it's just not what I want to be doing right now. So I'm fairly content doing what I'm doing, and I'm making fairly good money doing what I'm doing. So it's the same thing as you. Like, why do I want to change things?
Yeah, it's what's the point? I look at it a lot like, okay, my business is a one-man show and all I'm billing out is labor. And then you look at a big business who, let's say, I don't know, Nick, it's a few million, if not, like a builder would be 5-6 million a year.
Mm-hmm.
The way I look at it, that's $6 million of headaches.
You're absolutely right.
That's how I feel.
Yeah.
You are literally responsible for every
there's 14
dollar.
People. Yeah.
Yeah. Everything that their hands touch, every piece of material.
Spencer, I'm going to stop you because I'm going to do the same thing I do every time I finish a podcast. I'm going to drive home and reconsider my entire life. It's like, I'll drive, I'll be like, all right, so maybe I'll just make everyone start their own company. We'll all be individual carpenters. But I mean, you're not wrong, right? I think where the reason I do it is because I'm going after something bigger.
Right.
And not to combat what you nor you Tyler is doing, but I'm, as much as I love the carpentry and loved working for myself and loved all that, I love more the idea of the fact that eventually I'll be building the homes that I want to build, and it will be my vision and or our vision as a team, and it will be this team approach, and I get to hang out with 14 people that all really enjoy doing that. So that's the side. But headache, absolutely. It's a migraine, to be honest. It's, but there's good and bad. You opened up the podcast saying how sometimes you don't know why you do this. I say that all the time. It's like if anyone tells you that they don't question quitting, at least once a week, they're lying to you.
Yeah.
Like there's no way that's not true. And there's no way that's true, but I don't know. It's I guess I think you answered my question by saying that your market is filled with a bunch of one-man efficient carpenters, where I wanted to ask the question, these 3 builders that you're working for now, what happens if you get hurt?
Yeah, then, well, it happens all the time, though. There's a lot of turnaround with subcontractors, and you just scramble.
Right. So you say you break both your one leg. You break your leg tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
The 3 guys that you were working for, they don't bat an eye, right? They're just going right to the next guy.
It's not as easy as that. Unfortunately, unfortunately, the
it's all of the above.
It is. I'll explain why. Like builders, I've found that almost all builders want to have their guy.
Right.
There's their guy, and because you need to be able to call somebody and know that they're going to answer and they're going to come do what they need to do.
Absolutely.
So builder is going to have their primary subcontractor, and then usually you're going to have a secondary kind of guy supplementing that. If you see maybe your main guy can't keep up or you're in a pinch, you got somebody that you can call when you need to. But most builders all have a primary guy, and that actually makes it really hard as a subcontractor also, because like for me, then if I have a gap and I need work, it's actually really hard to find work because everybody's got their primary guy.
You become the secondary guy,
and you're the secondary. And if you're trying to come up with something, you're just kind of gambling and hoping for some luck that somebody's either fired somebody or somebody can't make it or, whatever. Like in my case right now, my main builder's got a pretty decent sized gap over the next couple months. So I'm going to my secondary builder, and I'm actually going to be trimming with his primary trim guy, who I get along with really well. And so we're going to do a couple of jobs together, and I'll probably maybe take a job by myself, just whatever. But it actually is really complicated.
Yeah, so in a situation like that, what if your secondary guy didn't have work? Like what? Scenario. What would be your marketing approach at that point?
My first marketing approach is always to go to my material vendor, say, hey, do you know of anybody needing anything? Like my millwork supplier has been like selling millwork forever, knows everybody, and he's well connected. So he's got me in with quite a few builders, not recently, but starting out was huge. So that would be my first place to go. And then I've probably worked for close to 10 builders. So then after that, I would start shooting some text messages. Hey, I've got some time open. You needing anything? And honestly, usually that doesn't work out well because like I said, everyone's got their primary guy.
Right.
So it can be tough. I haven't experienced everything. Like last year I was literally back to back full tilt all year with no gaps and no time to work for anybody else. So that kind of put me actually in a really vulnerable position going into these times where I do need some work, because now I haven't worked for anybody else for so long that I've kind of fallen out of those relationships a little bit. So it's
it's good and it's bad because you don't have to, you're just billing one person and you're only dealing with one person. But at the end of the day, if something happens there, something dries up, you're not the first name that people are going to think of because it's been a year since they've worked with you.
Yep. And that's why there's a barrier to entry in trim subcontracting, and a huge hindrance to growth is that whole thing that we just talked about in the scheduling. Because now imagine if I've got 3 employees I'm trying to keep busy.
Sure.
And I'm looking at this gap. I mean, we're going to talk about stress. It just doesn't work. So that's something I have not figured out.
That's something I struggle with too. I know the pace that I work and I know what I need lined up, and inevitably things don't mesh up or you have downtime, and the thought of keeping more than one person busy at a time, or one helper busy at a time, like that'll keep me up thinking about that 8 months from now, where like I have 8 months of work lined up and I'll be thinking about, but what about once that 8 months is over, what am I going to do? And then it's almost everything changes and everything that you projected it to be is completely different, and you just kind of roll with the punches. But it'll still keep me up at night thinking about a year from now, 9 months from now, 6 months from now, what am I going to do?
Yeah. And then you throw into it, like you're trying as a subcontractor, like I was doing work for these production guys too. And you just know you have to be there the day that you're scheduled to be there. And throwing that into the equation also is just extremely stressful. So I'm a lot more laid back where I'm at right now. I mean, if I get some time off, it's no big deal. It's not worth the stress of trying
Nick's
to keep
probably so jealous right now. Look at him.
My wife and kids are in Florida and I'm here.
Oh, that's a bummer. I'm going to Florida next week with mine.
Good.
I think that I've always admired what you do from a carpentry standpoint, but more so from your processes and all these systems that you develop, especially being able to do things on your own. Do you think that there's one that you enjoy more than the other? Or is it 50% the carpentry, 50% developing these systems and processes? Because I feel like you really get down with developing new tools and techniques and sorting out how to do things better.
Yeah, I love learning. That's what gets me going every day, is learning something and then also teaching it, which is what the whole Insider Carpentry channel evolved into. Is just that's what I really, really enjoy, even more than the carpentry, is finding a better way to do it and then share it. So yeah, systems and learning a new trick is definitely trips my trigger.
And are you developing a lot of this internally? Is this in your own head? Are you talking to other people? Are you kind of grabbing this from someone, grabbing that from someone, and meshing them together, a combination of all of it?
Like the processes or tricks? And definitely, I would say there's some that, especially, the last couple years, some things I've come up with on my own, but a lot of it is, the majority of it is bouncing back and forth between carpenters. Hey, how do you do this? Well, I do it this way. And most people don't realize, but if you put yourself out there on social media where everyone can see it and you're doing something wrong, you'll find out really quick.
Yep.
And you learn something new and you'll get better extremely, extremely fast. So that's the hive mind that I call it.
It's funny because I feel like it was years ago. It had to be 4 years ago, 5 years ago. I had a conversation with you, and I remember you were maybe using a Collins bit on your plywood, and you were testing nosing. You were testing nosing as to how it would hold up, and you were just nailing some off, and then you were just gluing some, and then you were whacking the nosing and popping it off. And like, that was your test to see if it would hold up. And I remember you said to me, good enough is good enough for me. And I feel like at that point, the stage I was in my career and what I was trying to do, and I was like, how does somebody just say good enough is good enough? And I don't know Spencer's market, and I don't know what he's doing. And I almost took offense to it and was probably like a dick, because like, how is good enough for your customers where I don't understand? So I should probably apologize for that.
No.
But I'm like, now that I look back at it and what he's actually doing in the time that he's spending to glue up nosings and see if a brad nail is going to hold, if he should just glue and clamp it, what the difference is with the ply prep bit on there. And then also, like, that saying good enough is good enough. That's something that I have trouble with, and I have to market myself to certain customers where they don't really have that mindset. But your ability to create this quality and then bring value to the table for your customers by finding that very tight line between spending too much time on something and not enough time on something, and being able to sell that at a competitive price and then walk away from it and it still hold up. Like, I have trouble with that, and that's why I've kind of pigeonholed myself to where I am. But it's amazing to see you do that and to be able to offer that at the price point that you do, and to be able to do it by yourself.
Well, I'll tell you, if you saw what the actual standards are, like I've been on job sites with other trim subs, and the standard is you're on a site, you're doing site built-ins, you spread some glue on the edge of the plywood, you nail your nosing on with a 15 gauge nail, there's no clamps, and then you wood putty it, and then get out your sander and go to town. That's literally the standard. So whenever I'm doing a ply prep bit and actually using a clamp, that's like a work of art in my world.
Yeah.
You know, like, I'm far, far exceeding the industry standards, you know, with that.
And that's what, you know, I think that was a question I asked earlier. And that's, you know, I feel I'm going to ask the question again. It's, do you feel as, you know, the appreciation, right? You know, you're going above and beyond what is required, you know, what is required by these builders at a market rate, which is competitive with everyone else.
But it's probably also that if you think about the way that he's doing this and the way that he's set up to doing that, and however he's referencing that nosing and everything else, like, he's saving time on the back end because now he's not filling stuff and he's not sanding stuff. So I don't know, like, does it matter if it's appreciated or it's not appreciated, because you're still giving them a good product, and it's almost like that lower grade product would take you just as much time, if not more.
Yeah, and
exactly.
I'm not arguing that point. I guess the part is where it just, I think it comes down to efficiency, right? You know, if you're able to create efficiencies in your process that you're ultimately getting a better product out of, like, you're creating some sort of safety net for you, because these guys are hiring you because, hey, Spencer does it just as fast, just as expensive, but the product is better, and there's where you're up. Like, you're not cheaper than everyone. You're better than everyone. You're moving the needle in the right direction.
Yeah. Going into it, whenever I went into trim subcontracting, I knew what I wanted to do. And I had, like, same thing, Tyler, you were talking about with the high ideals we have of perfection. I came in with that, but then I saw what the standards were every time I was around another trim crew. And I knew that I had to come up with those efficient ways to do things, or else I couldn't, number one, I couldn't live with myself with the quality, but number two, I had to do it to be able to make money too. So it, like, the systems and the efficiency is like, you had to come up with those things just to survive. And honestly, I didn't know if the business model would work or not. It was a complete experiment for me. even some days it still feels like it's a complete experiment.
It's like every day.
Yeah. Because if the market says no, the market says no. But thankfully, the saving grace has just been, like I talked about, those one-man show carpenters, like their methods are still the same ones from 1980. There's no laser tape measures. There's no clamps. There's no any of that stuff. What's a track saw? It's so that makes it easier to come up with those competitive advantages.
So I guess kind of in Nick's direction, do you feel that you're selling your quality to your builders, or your builders are selling your quality to their customers? Or no, it's just like your product is your product and it's similar to the other guy's product?
It's definitely not similar to the other guy's product based on everything I've seen.
No, your work isn't, but is it being sold as it's trim is trim to the client?
Nick, you said it on a podcast, and it really resonated with me. Like, your job as the business owner is to sell the value of your employees.
Right.
And I feel 100% that that's the builders who I work for, right, that is their job, to sell my value. Not that they're going to say to the client even necessarily that I've got this trim carpenter and he does great work. It's to sell the value of the house that they're offering, which in turn, sells my value higher.
Right.
But I want to align myself with a builder who is able to sell that higher value.
Right.
That's a huge, huge thing, because if they're not, then I'm just competing in the race to the bottom.
Yeah, and I think that's what I meant by you're on the right side of that needle. It's like you're not coming in being the cheaper one or the faster one. You're coming in producing a better quality, and you're doing the due diligence on your own time to become more efficient and ultimately being more competitively priced.
Yeah.
Going back to the teaching thing. Sorry, I'm cutting you off.
Yep.
I said I wouldn't cut you off. I said I would.
No, you're fine.
I said I would interrupt you, not cut you off. Same thing. Going back to the teaching thing, because I'm really interested in this. And you, Tyler, asked what you would prefer to do, right? And you kind of alluded to the fact that you love teaching, you love developing processes, you love sharing it. I mean, you started the YouTube channel not too long ago. You're doing very well on that. You're gaining. I mean, there's a lot of attention there.
Mm-hmm.
Would you ever consider making that your focus?
No, I want the best of both worlds.
Okay.
I really just want to be alone in a house by myself
with my video camera. You don't know how big of a loser you are until you're walking around alone in a house with a GoPro strapped to your chest.
I feel like that's better than having people around you doing it. That's why I barely ever say anything on stories, because I'm like, somebody's going to hear me in here talking to myself. If I knew that nobody was home, I feel like I wouldn't have any issues with it.
Yeah, I agree 100%. It still freaks me out talking into the selfie mode on a camera.
Dude,
especially people are around you. I remember I used to watch Nick in Home Depot filming himself. How do you do that right now? I'd be mortified.
I recorded a story walking down the sidewalk today.
You're basically everyone I've ever made fun of.
Yeah. And I'm like, you know what? People probably just think I'm on FaceTime.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, wait, delete that. And then I say it again, and they're like, he just said that.
I think I did IG for like 2 years before I ever did selfie mode. And whenever I finally did, people were like, well, you have a face. But yeah, it's a hard pill to swallow.
Well, but the teaching thing's interesting to me because, and I think you can continue to have the best of both worlds. I mean, you have the attention, but Tyler, I look at like the guys like, all these carpentry clinics that go to the trade shows, right? Gary Katz. Mm-hmm. And at some point, he's not going to be doing trade shows anymore. And, like someone like Spencer, where you enjoy teaching and developing methods. And I think you just have a lot to offer to the industry. And, being a one-man show, Tyler, the same, ultimately that company goes with you, right? When you retire, the company retires.
Yeah.
And, hopefully my path is that when I retire, the company continues. That's kind of how I want it set up. But the opportunity that you guys have as individuals is to give back and teach, and in the way that you're doing through YouTube. And I'm not saying you have to go be a trade show guy, right? I'm not, but I think I don't want you to lose sight of how important I think that is as an individual. And this is an opportunity where you create, like we say, your legacy. There's your legacy.
100%. Yeah, and that's how I view it too. I consider it a calling, and it's crazy to look back, because I remember back in the day, I think it was, I don't know if you guys remember Sean Van Dyke. He started like a Facebook group whenever he was just kind of getting his business going, and I wasn't on Instagram, and somebody said, hey, you should go check out Instagram. There's a bunch of carpenters on there. And I thought, like, no, Instagram's for girls or whatever. I really did. It's like, that's what women post pictures of what they made for supper. That was my concept of Instagram.
Great recipes.
Yeah. I got on, and it was just crazy. I looked at the amount of accounts that were there, guys showing just incredible work. And it happened pretty quickly. I created another account. It was Hoosier Carpenter back in the day.
I was trying to think of what your old profile or handle was.
Yeah, it was Hoosier Carpenter, and just started nerding out, sharing, this is what I'm doing. And it was completely anonymous. So it was kind of like no shame. Again, just walking around a house saying, hey, this is how I do this is how I do that. People liked it, and it grew. And I started getting just messages all the time about how much it was helping people, young guys, just saying how much they were learning and stuff. And it started to grow into just seeing that there was something bigger there and a bigger opportunity. And then also looking at my own business and how hard it was to bring a guy on, spend 3 years training him just to walk away, to have him walk away, and you lost all that. So I thought, well, what if I could take these lessons, put them in video form, and then they're there, and you've got a system and a process then for training guys. And that's what the whole industry needs. And I wanted to create a membership website at first. And that's what I actually started to do. But it was going to be a huge amount of work. I was going to have to charge a decent amount of money to get access to the lessons. And then you don't know if anyone's actually going to pay the money. And then just the whole thing kind of started to open up, where I could see a path with YouTube and affiliate marketing to where I could actually create the lessons to give them to contractors for free. And then I could make money on the back end through affiliate marketing and ad revenue. And it was like, that was the answer for me. Like, I could do what I wanted to do and actually justify it. So,
well, I think there's also something, really big to say about the equity that you gain with people, right? You're giving this information away, and you're basically, collecting equity with all these people.
Yeah.
Because there's no way that what you're sharing wasn't probably learned from someone else.
Absolutely.
And that's how we all are. It's like we're all learning from each other. And, I would like to think that none of us are sharing this saying, hey, this is what I created. I'm sharing it because this is what we have learned, or we have taught each other.
Yeah.
And creating a membership website would be great. It could be hugely successful. But doing it the way that you're doing, like you said, allows you to do what you want, make a little money with it, but it's not you're not trapped by it.
Right. Well, the thing I look at is like Gary Katz, for example. He's got his DVDs. I didn't actually buy his DVDs until probably, I bet, 3 years ago. And because I couldn't afford them until then. There was always a tool or something else that was more important.
Mm-hmm.
And by the time I actually bought them, I already knew everything that was in them for the most part. So how do we get the information to the people that actually need it? Free is the answer.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, I definitely don't ever want to project that this is all stuff that I've come up with. There's some that I've definitely come up with.
Sure.
But the vast majority there's been a few key carpenters who have mentored me virtually, but then the hive mind is incredible. You just pick up something here, something there. I just put a YouTube video up about cutting off the bottom of doors with a track saw, which I thought was pretty clever. Well, then two guys, I don't know how many comments there were on that video. There's like 150,000 views, but two guys said, "Oh, I just turned my circular saw on its side and cut them off." And if you think about the sled on your circular saw is going to be 1.125 inches or 1.5 inches, depending on the size circular saw you have. These are production guys. Like, I had never even considered that you could just use the floor as a guide.
Yeah.
And just run your circular saw. And I'm not saying that's the highest quality way to do it, but I actually think that it would be pretty effective. But point being,
yeah, it's super smart.
Yeah, it's like I read that and it was like, how did I not think of that? But
it's like that's how they developed the whole skill saw. That's what it was for.
But then the fact is, there was only 2 comments out of a couple hundred or whatever of 2 guys actually said that. And in the 15 years that I've been in carpentry, I've never heard that ever. So it's just an example.
So next week's video is going to be you turning your circular saw.
Oh, I guarantee the next house I'm turning my I'm going to try it, and I'm going to show whether it works or not works. You're
going to end up hurting yourself doing that. Your builder's got to find somebody else at this point.
Yeah. But stuff like that just kind of blows my mind whenever people chime in like that. So.
That's really the fun in all of this, right? Is learn. Like, I love when you said when you do something wrong, you're gonna know about it.
Absolutely.
And I love that because it's like, all right, let's dig into this. Let's walk me through it. What did I do wrong? How do I make it right? I want to understand, and that's how I would say the majority of what I've learned and what my team has learned is through messing it up.
Yep.
In one way or the other. It's we're constantly learning and constantly doing things, better and better. We have a saying, if this is you have to be doing the best that you possibly can. From a quality standpoint, from an execution, like if we're, we just sistered all these eye joists in a project and they're getting ready to sister it. And I asked the question, I'm like, what's the plan? And they started walking through it. I'm like, stop. Have we talked to the manufacturer of the eye joist? Like, give them a call, 5-minute phone call, explain the situation, make sure that what we're doing works, like by the manufacturer's specification, because we want to make, if we're going through the trouble, let's do it right. Let's make sure that they tell us the right way to do it. It's having those conversations and challenging ourselves as individuals and as a team to make sure that, we've taken all the necessary steps to do something at the absolute best of our ability.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, though, in my world, that is a rare thing to come across other subcontractors and employees of businesses who are even remotely even coming close to that mindset.
It's tough. People become complacent, right? It's, it's a constant battle.
I'd say they're coming in complacent. I mean, from what I'm seeing, even the young guys, some of the young guys are the worst. I mean, at least the older guys have somewhat of a sense of, I don't know what the right word is, ethic.
Well, probably they've been burned before, so it's like, all right, won't do that again.
Yeah, and just, I don't know, but man, especially I see, it's interesting because the different subcontracting trades tend to gravitate towards different cultural groups. And a lot of times, like the electricians, plumbers, HVAC tends to be larger companies employing younger guys, getting these younger guys out of high school into the trades. And just the work ethic is just, it's just foreign. It's just not even there. It's scary.
I think that is probably fairly accurate. I think that a lot of people are coming out and they don't, if it's been generational, if it's just that, we're taught that you don't want to work with your hands and that drive doesn't seem to be there. But I also think that we're probably seeing it, like you're seeing these kids drive through your own eyes where you're trimming houses single-handedly.
Yeah.
So like we're comparing people's drive. Our view of people being lazy or driven probably is on one extreme, and then these people could be on the other extreme. But it is tough, and that's something that I always have one full-time person, and an issue I have is that I feel like if I'm working that hard, everyone should be working that hard. And it's tough to let that go because it's not their company. It's not their business. They don't really have any stake in it, but I'm sitting there, I'm busting my butt right now. Why aren't you busting your butt? So there's times where I just sit there. I'm like, I wish I were alone right now so that I didn't have almost this pent up resentment that I'm sitting here killing myself and you're on your phone, or you're taking another break, or you're not thinking about what the next 10 steps are.
100%. I'm with you there. My problem is I can't get over that, or I haven't been able to get over that. Like whenever, the site, people don't realize how much, like we talk about tricks of the trade and tools and stuff like that, but the psychological factor for production trimming or siding or concrete or framing, whatever it is, it's huge. Like you've got to roll into it every day with momentum to really be productive. And you throw one of those types of guys into the equation and it's just like a boat anchor on everybody's heels.
And I think that you have to, especially with what you're doing, you're planning for 10 steps ahead of where you are at any given moment. And I think it's always tough for me that it's the next thing and the next thing. It's not actually the task at hand. I'm planning for the next day, the next 2 days, the finished product, which is probably very similar to what you're doing. And then you bring somebody in who's either not engaged or not thinking ahead, and they're just stuck in that moment of going through the motions, and they're not seeing anything other than what's directly in front of them. And it's so hard to teach that. And I don't know if that is something you can teach, or you just need to find that personality type. But I found that to be the most difficult. And that, you know what, I may be bringing a lot of that on myself because I am controlling the whole process. If I were to give up some of that control, maybe people start thinking for themselves a little bit more. But I guess that's also just my personality type.
Yeah. I feel like we'd have a very similar personality type, and it's just hard to let go.
I feel like you're just way faster. Like it would take me it'd take you 1/10 of the time to do something that I would get comparable results. I feel like anyone can do anything well if they take long enough time.
I think that's what I'm most impressed with when I see your stuff, Spencer, is like the efficiency. And, that's been a big topic of, us internally as a team is how do we become more efficient? And how do we look at, on the micro level and at the macro level? Ken and I had a conversation yesterday about basically, I've talked about prefabricating. I've talked about panelizing homes. We talked about that on a recent podcast. And I think that if, there's enough planning that goes into something, you could pre-manufacture everything. It's just like building an on-site built-in off-site, right? Like if you take the necessary steps, you don't have to build it on-site. You can prefabricate that thing and bring it in pieces. Just like kitchen cabinets, they used to be built in place. Now they're built in a factory and then installed. And it's similar. It's similar steps in the sense that with enough planning and with enough forethought and consideration, that efficiency can be that efficiency level increases. You're working more efficiently because you've taken all these steps off of the job site, and incrementally increased all of the steps that it took to do your job. Whether it's equipment, whether it's investing in equipment, whether it's a process, whether it's your, for instance, I see guys. We had a job over in Boston that they basically mitered all of their casing in the shop and put the lamellos in, and then they got on site and they were blasting through casing on doors because everything was pre-mitered. All they had to do is cut the lengths. And it's like, I don't know if that always works. Like if, they're new doors, so they should be square, so that, that should, in one sense it should work. But it was just the thought of, hey, we're going to save time by doing this in a shop. Yeah.
Well, it's all just testing the theory. I remember back in the day, my theory starting out in trim subcontracting, I had a big trailer that I pulled with my truck, and I had it packed to the brim with tools. I had clamps on it and everything, and I started out building my built-ins on site. And I remember a guy challenging me and saying, like, that's so stupid. You should be doing all that in the shop. And I completely resisted it. And as time goes on just a little bit, then you see the light. And I remember one winter I made a big step and I bought a saw stop, table saw, planer, joiner, and dust collector all in the same winter. And I outfitted my garage, and that became my shop. But that became the most profitable part of my business. I mean, the shop is. And it allows me to do things that other subcontractors aren't doing or can't do because they don't have that. So it's just knocking down our theories. And sometimes the theories, we test them and we find out, well, that didn't work, and we go back to however we were doing it. But testing conventional wisdom is huge.
I think that having a shop for you as a sub, it is definitely going to put you in a different category. I think that you don't realize it seems, I think that a lot of that is even when you first start out, right? To build a built-in and to take those measurements on site and then go somewhere else and build it, that's very scary. It's like, well, what if I didn't account for this, or what are they? But then as you gain confidence in yourself and your abilities, and how that needs to fit, and you realize where you screwed up before and what you need to account for, it becomes easier and easier to go in and take those measurements. And then you have enough confidence in yourself to go build that off site. So I think a lot of that probably, well, one, you didn't have a shop. That makes it tough to build stuff in a shop when you don't have one.
Yeah.
But it is building something off site. You kind of take it for granted and you forget about that. But I remember the first few things that I had to build that would either be in a funky space or not fit well. And you don't really know what you need to measure or where, and you're kind of figuring it out as you go. And it takes that experience to be able to walk into a space and say, okay, I know where my pinch points are. I know that I need to check where this is, and this could be a hang up, and installation could get screwed up by this, and then be able to build that offsite and have it fit seamlessly.
Yeah. Yeah. One of my best purchases, I bought an iPad Pro. That way I could take pictures and then I could draw on top of the pictures, my measurements. And, that way you could see where the electrical plugs were, and you have it right there. And I get pictures from every angle. And like you said, then sit down in the office, draw every built-in up in SketchUp. And SketchUp is another huge thing. As a sub, almost no other sub is probably using a computer program to draw up their built-ins and stuff. I think that's another huge advantage for builders, to have somebody doing that.
Is that factored into your time?
Go ahead.
Yes. So I've kind of, it was tough at first because I would say I was giving away that time at first. But I'm trying to think, like on bigger jobs, I can have a lot of built-ins.
Mm-hmm.
And for that, it's pretty easy to know, okay, I'm going to have 4 hours sitting down and just drawing built-ins.
Mm-hmm.
And like
Are you drawing them up to get a sign off for your builders?
Yeah, that's where I was going. So like the level that we're trying to go for, like with my main builder, is just a very high level of communication with giving the client renderings that they can see, and then sign off on. But what I ran into then was, like, whenever I do my shop drawings, I do them in 2D. I do a front, top, and side view. So it's super easy to just draw that up, put measurements on it, and go build it. That doesn't mean anything to your average homeowner. They want it, and nowadays a 3D rendering is where it's at. So we've kind of been going back and forth on what the best thing is to do there. I don't like sitting around doing 3D renderings because it takes so long. And then if you screw something up and have to revise it, it's just a nightmare to revise a 3D built in. It just takes way longer. But that's still kind of a work in progress.
I wonder if your builder could integrate somebody who uses chief architect, because I feel like it's way easier. At least they could get a better sense of what it's going to look like, pretty close to what you're drawing. The only other thing I found is that when I start, I'm not doing as many as you, but when I am building a cabinet, if I start making 3D adjustments to it, I just keep copy and pasting everything, so that, like, as I go, if I need to make a change, I can revert back.
I see.
And not have to, like, start adjusting my 3D. So, like, every time that if I'm taking a cabinet, I'm building a cabinet, and I start laying out the width and the height and then rails and stiles, like, every time I go to fit another component of it, I copy and paste and just put the new one next to it. So that I'm not, if I screw something up so bad, I can just, like, erase everything I just did and copy and paste the last version and start over.
Yeah. It's funny you said that, because that's exactly what we did over this last year. And the challenge with that then is, then I had basically an interior designer drawing my built-ins for me.
Yeah.
And then the challenge is, like, well,
there's a lot of challenges there.
I don't want to build it like that. Like that, the construction, like the way it looked would just be horrible, and it just made no sense sometimes.
Yeah, so, we take, we'll work with designers and our architects and get elevations, floor plans, and things like that, and get the general idea of what it looks like. But we take it from there and produce all the technicals.
Yeah. So basically, what it's been is, if they produce their rendering for the client, but then I end up just drawing it myself in 2D. And then if there's something majorly wrong, I'll tell them, like, hey, this doesn't work, and they'll revise it on their end or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, I think especially with your entire model, you don't want to be spending hours behind the keyboard drafting up cabinetry. Yeah. You can build them quicker than you can draw them.
And you're literally right. I can a lot of times build something quicker than it takes to communicate about it on what they want. And I feel like the main builder that I work with, most of the builders, they get that. That's why I like working for builders, is they're pretty good at managing the clients, because they understand the need for efficiency too. Like, you can't just sit there with that back and forth on every single detail. And as a subcontractor, if they understand that, it makes it a lot easier for me. Kind of shields me from that a little bit, but sometimes it can still get a little bit out of hand.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things. If you were to give somebody the option, sure, they'll give their input on it, but a lot of times it's just not necessary. The difference between A and B, is negligible, and you just spent however many extra hours trying to get those things sorted out, where it's just like, don't even give them those options, and just move ahead with it.
Yeah, it's like on my built-ins a lot of times for like a bench top or the shelves or something, I could route a really cool profile onto that would really set it off. But do you go down that road?
Yeah.
And do I show them my 50 router bits, or do I just go with my typical 5/32 radius and, we're done?
It's tough. You open up an entire can of worms. I feel like
I think
the more options, usually the worse. It's like, hey, maybe be like, here, you have two choices.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's where going, connecting it to like the interior designer or architect argument is having one of them on board, right? Is, there's literally thousands of tile options. They're going to help kind of bring to the table 3.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, you have 50 router bits and, no one's designed anything other than, a square edge. And like Tyler said, going down the open a can of worms of, hey, I could do one of these 50. It's like, I like those, I think. Can you do a sample?
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, let me, yeah. It's like, it's going to take me 10 minutes for every router bit to switch it.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, sure. Can you stain it now? But no, it's, that's, I think the challenge, that's the argument for having a designer, involved. And, I think more so on the custom end, I think about it with our own projects where, we've been in projects where even a designer's been involved, but they lean on us for the infamous, well, how do you usually do it? Or what would you do here? It's like, okay, I see where this is going. I'm going to design, I'm going to be designing this project. And it's, we have our contemporary job that we're doing. We have a lot of creative freedom with the client, which is great in a lot of ways, but also terrible in a lot of ways, because I show up on site and we start powwowing and someone comes up with a cool idea and we're all like, yeah, let's do that. And it's like, and it's then we do that. And it's like, but if we had done the upfront design, again, going back to like all the planning and preparation and consideration for all this stuff, it would just be go time.
Yep.
And to your side of it, it's the efficiency. Like, you don't have time to do 50 samples. You don't have time to show them 50 router bits.
Yeah.
You have time to build that built-in. You draw it once, get approval, build it, get it in, move on.
Yeah. And I find I'm actually even I'm on the good extreme of actually even wanting to give more options. Like, we have what we call the trim walkthrough a lot of times, where you get to drywall stage and then you walk the homeowner through a house and you talk about what their selections are, what they want, where, so on and so forth. And a lot of times that'll even happen at the millwork vendors, like the lumberyard, in a conference room where the homeowner's making 1,000 selections on different things that day for their home. And by the time they're getting into their millwork, the only thing anyone wants is to go home. And so the selections get made, and then I show up on site, and it's like none of these profiles go together. None of these details go together. And just the reality is there's just, it's hard.
What do you do in that? What do you do in that case? Do you raise your hand?
I'm a trim guy, so I whine a lot. There's sometimes it just is what it is. Usually it's hard because I used to go to a lot more of the walkthroughs and I would have a lot more of a voice in the conversation. I could almost even run the meeting where I would be suggesting things, and then I could take my insight as the guy building it to value engineer it to give them the most bang for their buck.
Right.
Whereas if you leave the homeowner and an interior designer to take pictures off Pinterest, they're going to come up with the most insanely complicated pictures from $20 million homes that you can find. And they're expecting me to do them for $50.
I'm pretty sure I remember you whining about a staircase off Pinterest not too long ago.
Oh yeah, which one is that?
I feel like that's every customer sends you inspiration photos for a bathroom or a kitchen, and their inspiration is probably 10 times more money than they're willing to spend.
It's like it's like 50 foot
project.
It's like a 50-foot long kitchen wall.
Yeah,
and it's
they're like, I'm thinking like 25 grand for the kitchen, and it's like you just sent me a $250,000 kitchen inspiration.
Yeah.
We really, I don't know if we could value engineer this. What is that when you're doing these walkthroughs, right? And you're even saying that you're value engineering them. Have you given them some sort of a number at this point on the job? Because you're hired for the job.
Yeah. It's kind of evolved, and a lot of it has to do with the trust level that I have with the builder. So like it used to be, they're all kind of different, and it depends on the contract that they have. If the builder bid the job with a hard number, or if they're doing a cost plus or a fee, I don't usually know that, but I can kind of discern that based off of how they're interacting with me.
Yeah.
A lot of times it used to be before ground was ever broken, builder call me up, we'd go through the print, say a lot of times built-ins are annotated on the print, but then you'd coffered ceiling here, we got crown in this room, Wayne's in this room, and I would send an estimate before ground was even broken, and then we would do a trim walkthrough, and the homeowner would revise everything, and then I'd resubmit, and at that point it's either it doesn't matter because it's cost plus, or it's you go through the long process of a change order.
So they're basically okay with your pricing at that point, and now they'll determine what they want to do.
Yeah. Trust is big. I mean, you have to have trust that I'm giving a reasonable price for whatever the detail is.
Is there any point in that client walkthrough where if they're expressing interest in doing something outside the norm that you then upsell?
Usually I'm always downselling.
Yeah, I was gonna be like, I don't feel like you're upselling.
Why are we so different?
No, it is, and I get in trouble for it because, okay, we're in these walkthroughs, and you have usually, okay, you got me, a client, and an interior designer, and it's going to be 2 versus 1, wanting these high-end details, and then I'm looking at whatever they're proposing, and I'm thinking in my head, there's no way they have this they're not going to want to pay for this. So then I have to carefully try and say, well, this is going to be a little expensive, and it would just get me in a lot of trouble because then it turns into it's just bad.
I look at them like
they send you inspiration for raised panel wainscoting, and you sell shadow boxes.
Oh yeah, that's that's it. My quick and dirty wainscoting, like that's the norm. And then like you get these Pinterest pictures, and it's like that's gonna cost as much as your whole trim allowance is.
So what if somebody were willing to pay? Do you think that you would still kind of talk them out of it because you want to get in and out, or would you be excited to kind of integrate some of that stuff?
Oh no, I love it. If they're willing to do something cool, I'm all about it. The only time, and I can't really say I've really had this, is there is a max on labor wise where if I know it's going to take me more than 6 weeks, then it gets pretty hard for me to do it solo.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, but the kind of the niche of the homes where I like to stay in keeps me in that range where I'm not going over that time where I can still do it as a one-man show.
And that's basically a component of square footage and budget on the job that's kind of keeping you in that.
Yeah. In my market, probably up to $1.5 million home. That's what the max I've done solo. as far as the trim package solo. Then once they get more than that, then you're looking at either having a crew do it with multiple guys or a couple subcontractors to get it done in a timely manner.
So are your builders, do they have almost a ratio or a cost component for what they want to allocate towards trim on a budget like that? Is it, hey, we put X amount towards trim?
Yeah, I would say so. I don't know exactly what that is, but I kind of know my numbers fall into a general range.
So then conceptually, they're kind of designing all of that around that number up front.
Yeah. And it's a constantly evolving thing. You know, it kind of started out and a lot of those details were not worked out on the front end, but we all know that clients always want more than what they can afford.
Yeah.
So if you don't nail down your selections on the front end, you're going to have a bad relationship on the back end. So we've been trying to get a lot more of the selections nailed down before everything is signed off on the front end, and the relationship goes a lot better.
Yeah, and I think that's just some sort of form of communication, even if it's not necessarily verbal, but it's just like in your contract with the customers, take the time to have as much detail in there as possible, because it's just going to protect you. Because yes, that's included. No, that's not included. You know, if a customer thinks that they're getting a certain detail for a certain price, and then all of a sudden you guys are like, no, we didn't compensate for that, or we didn't account for that, but all along the customer thought that that's what they were getting, what do you do at that point? You know, you either have to lose money, or you have to say no and then create bad feelings.
Yeah. Well, it's like, I have kind of a base, you know, like for a locker unit, a built-in locker unit. Every house I trim has a built-in locker unit and kind of a standard base rate for that. But then if you do that on the front end, inevitably they're going to come with a Pinterest picture that's got drawers across the bottom and some fancy doors on it and who knows what else. And then it's hard. It's like, how do you tell them this wasn't what you were budgeted for?
Those are two different things.
Yeah. So, and they don't usually get it. So it's best to get their inspiration photos and get the designs on the front end, and it just seems to go better.
What were you going to say, Nick?
No, sorry. I was yawning.
Oh, there you go. You were like very small up there. I thought you were about to say something. Now you're in full vision.
No, my headphone cut out for a second, and then I yawned because I'm tired, not because you're boring.
I've enjoyed watching everything that you've been doing over the past few years. And I have massive amounts of respect for working by yourself day in and day out, because I think that it sounds amazing to me. And then like by the end of week one, I can't find enough songs on the radio to keep me from going crazy.
That's why I asked in the beginning, it's like, how do you split your time? And it's the same, you know, driving around, you listen to the same stuff. And working, you know, I meant to make a comment, while I'm working, I can't listen to a podcast or an audiobook because I'm not paying attention to it. And if I'm listening to something, you know, maybe a rambling podcast, but an audiobook, people are like, yeah, I listen to audiobooks when I work. I'm like, when I listen to an audiobook, I'm like trying to like make sure I understand where this is going. Yeah. Like I'm listening to this book for a reason, because I'm interested in the topic and I want to retain it.
Yeah.
But I agree with Tyler. It's like music gets old, you know, podcasts, like it is like I think I've only done on my own one project solo, like a long-term project. And, you know, it's boring to me.
Yeah. I honestly just came to the conclusion that I'm weird. And I'm not even kidding. Like, it's like I said it before, it's a specific personality type that fits really well with what I do. And it's not to say like there's days I used to work with crews whenever I started construction with a few guys, and I miss that definitely, but I would miss more just having the autonomy to do what I want when I want. And Instagram actually helps a lot with that, because you're still interacting with a lot of people.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like you got your brothers who are tradesmen that you can kind of come and go a little bit, and it just kind of takes the edge off of the boredom, I guess. I don't really feel like I get bored though.
No, because you're doing everything by yourself, so you don't really have an opportunity to become bored. You're going to become bored, and then you're just not doing anything. Nothing's getting done.
Well, I think a couple levels of baseboard, it gets a little boring. But
I think it's like awesome framers, right? We talk, when we talk to Tim, how he videos himself dancing and singing on like in these houses. He's like, we're alone, man. Like there's no one there. It's not,
100%.
I'm not, I could never do that if people were around. I'm like, right. But then 100,000 people watch you do it online. And it's very similar. It's like, you are alone, but then you are interacting with a lot of people.
It's crazy.
I got to ask, what came in carpenter?
Oh man,
you guys.
Biggest loser on earth.
every time I see you guys, like I'm sure it's all in good fun.
It's there's three guys that I would consider like legitimate close friends on Instagram, and he's one of them.
That's cool.
Chicago Carpenter would be the other.
Yep.
I've known him way back before Instagram. And another guy, not as many people would know, would be Matt Baum's Strong Tower Carpentry.
Okay.
But we go back to like the internet forum days.
Were you on Contractor Talk?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so we've got a 4-person chat that's always going.
Sure.
And no, Pete, I would love to actually go visit him sometime.
Dude, who wouldn't?
Yeah. My wife though, she would be she basically says no, because if we're going to go on a vacation,
right,
it's not going to be so that I can go hang out with Pete on a tropical island.
Right. He's been on our short list to have on, and I see the stuff he does. It's so, I always get a kick out of his stories. Yeah. It's like, so today I'm working on this teak bar. I'm like walking into another room with my volume all the way up so I can hear what he's doing. I'm like, why isn't he talking loud? But
making fun of the old monotone voices.
Yeah. No, it's I love seeing that, and it's funny to we talked about forums recently. It's how they all died, and when social media came around, but I remember Contractor Talk, and that was like the start of internet sharing and talking about process, and I mean,
it's really interesting. A lot of people wouldn't realize this, but I actually credit Justin, Chicago Carpenter. JLC forum was incredible back in the day, before my time. I'm 31, and he's about 10 years older than me, but he had so much of the knowledge off of that forum, and he bridged the gap kind of between that and Instagram now. So much of a lot of the trade stuff, carpentry related stuff that you'll see on Instagram came from Justin, but he was like the hard drive of the hive mind on JLC. And he kind of bridged that generation and what we have now. And a lot of people probably don't realize that, but it's a pretty huge amount of knowledge passed through that channel.
Yeah, it's cool to see how it's evolved, and I said it this year at IBS is that I feel like the positivity in this trade, or in all of trades, is increasing. There's less and less negativity, and there's more and more collaboration, even on a local basis. I make an effort to introduce myself to other builders, and it's we might compete against each other, but let's do it in a collaborative manner. It's like, hey, is this a better job for you than I? Like, I don't want to go, let's work together. And it just, I see that, and maybe it's just me personally evolving, but I believe that the industry is really trending towards that, because it's either you're going to collaborate and be positive about what you do, or there's not going to be any room for you.
Yeah. It's a really hard thing to accept, because everyone wants to protect what they know.
Right.
And it's so scary. Like, well, what if my competitor knows this secret, but it just doesn't matter.
It doesn't.
Yeah, and I think you still got to put the effort in. If somebody in your area, probably not going to happen, because there's all old people who aren't going to be on Instagram watching you, stealing your tools and techniques. But if somebody's going to go through the effort to take what you're doing and then implement it and do that, then
good for them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's team up.
You still have to do it.
Right.
Yeah. Let's do a big house together. Let's.
Right. And it's even beyond that. It's like, I genuinely believe that, if you're worried about not sharing the secret, like if I have a secret, I'm not going to tell you what it is. And you ask me the question, if I don't answer you, someone else is going to give them the answer. Mm-hmm. Just because you didn't doesn't mean that they're not going to figure it out. So rather than diverting that attention away from you, become the professional. Become the guy that has the answer. Become the go-to, and then you develop this relationship with that person.
Yeah. And then they're going to share with you what they know.
Exactly.
And you're going to be way better off than you would have
Absolutely.
been to try and protect everything.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I think we should definitely get
Cayman.
Get him on. I want to get a plug for Spencer's YouTube channel too, because I think even with everyone coming up through the ranks and learning trim carpentry, or even just looking to get into the trades, it's a perfect example of what you can do, even a business startup on your own. And not have a super high overhead, and still it doesn't really matter what your market is. You can make it happen and make a career and do well with it. But you're also giving back, like you said, to everyone through that channel, and you're educating and teaching, which a lot of people aren't. And sure, you're probably making a little bit of money doing that, but I would venture to say that that's not the reason why you're filming yourself alone in a house
with a GoPro
on a weekly basis.
No, I think I've got a pretty long track record of sharing trade knowledge before I ever got anything for it.
Yeah.
I think of it's the resource that I wish I would have had 10 years ago.
That's an awesome way to look at it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So your Insider Carpentry on YouTube, 44.2 subscribers.
Yeah.
Killing it, man.
It was hard to start it up, but it's gone decent for the first year, basically.
I remember when you were contemplating it. But yeah, I mean, there's, front door cutting while still hanging. Oh, is that the one you were talking about?
Yeah, that's what I was talking about. Yeah.
Just put your
and then your Instagram's also Insider _ Carpentry, 65,000 followers. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Just people.
Yeah, if you guys,
I feel like it still blows my mind that many people are just interested in carpentry and everything else.
It's so cool.
Yeah, it definitely isn't the personality, that's for sure.
That's like me. If you listen to me talk, it's just the monotone. I feel like people make fun of it all the time. I'm just I don't feel like I'm that monotone, and I feel like I'm way more enthusiastic. And then I listen to it, and I'm like, that's terrible. I sound like I want to die right now.
Yeah. I don't allow my wife and kids to play my YouTube videos while I'm home because I can't stand to hear myself. Yeah, it's bad. Then I got YouTube it's amazing how much different Instagram comments are from YouTube. Instagram, everyone's positive.
Oh, yeah.
Almost always.
Yeah.
I mean, by far the majority. You get on YouTube,
yeah,
it's a completely different ball.
Really?
It's incredibly negative. And it's like 6 minutes, 37 seconds in, you had your safety glasses on your head, not your eyes. It's like, It's like
every video.
It's like, what? Why? People are watching it just to find that one thing wrong so they can comment.
Yeah.
It's so wild.
Yeah. And a lot of times it's so blatantly obvious in their comment that they have no clue what they're talking about either.
Yeah.
It's one thing if you're going to critique me because I'm doing something wrong, but a lot of times it's just armchair quarterbacks.
Mm-hmm.
And but I got just berated the first videos because I talk slow. I don't know. At least in YouTube videos, I was just talking slow.
Mm-hmm.
And people, so I have to like make a conscious effort to talk faster.
Just speed it up like 1.5 times.
Yeah. That's what everyone commented. Like, it's okay if you watch it at 1.5. It's bearable.
Hey, this is Spencer, and I can trim a window, and this is how I do it. And this is at first I cut the casing, and that's funny.
Oh well, at least just tell them that your bank account just keeps growing as they continue to watch.
Yeah,
like that's fine. I'm going to talk slow, and it's going to be long, and I'm just going to keep getting paid for it.
Yeah, I don't bother. I don't even respond.
Yeah, it's not
worth it.
Well, Spencer, this was awesome. Really appreciate you hopping on tonight, man. I'm glad it worked out.
Yeah, good conversation.
Yeah, it's funny. I just sent him a DM back. I realized that it got lost to the group, and I told him that we'd schedule something in advance. And John's away on vacation. I'm pretty sure I just sent it maybe last night, laying in bed, and John's on vacation. And Nick's like, "Do you want to have Spencer on? Might be too last minute." I just messaged him that we're gonna try and be professional and schedule him in advance.
Well, I literally drove to Walmart and bought a webcam an hour before.
What? I didn't know that.
Yeah. So
Dude, you're the man.
It's all good.
Well, now you can return it because it's basically
no. I'll probably use it for some YouTube videos.
Oh, there you go.
I want to do something on pricing and some of the technical business end of things too. So,
well, if anyone's listening and wants to see some of these videos, Insider Carpentry on YouTube or Insider_Carpentry, hit Spencer up. Don't talk about his voice.
Yeah, but, and then just speed it up to 1.5 times, and you'll be good.
Yeah.
Let him know what you want to see from a sole proprietor, single man show, lifting giant beams up by himself against the ceiling and doing a killer job. So.
Yeah, and you should know we've had a ton. So we have this list of guests that we're going to have on, and we always tell ourselves that we're going to get it very organized. And
I said this today.
Reach out to people, and you've been so many people are always like, "You got to get Spencer on. You got to get Spencer on," and our list just grows, and there's almost no organization. And there's going to be a ton of people who are super pumped that we got you on.
I appreciate it. There's an incredible amount of awesome carpenters out there. I consider the guys on IG like brothers. I really do. It's just a pretty amazing community.
Yeah, we all love what you're doing. And then giving back to the community. I think that everyone says that they're doing that, but not everyone's necessarily doing that. And you definitely are. Cause I know, I guarantee there's a ton of young kids who are somehow finding you on Instagram or finding you on YouTube. And again, you are that resource that these kids need that you wish you had 10 years ago. So It's awesome.
That's the goal.
Well, Spencer, we appreciate you, man. We will talk to you soon.
Thank you. Enjoy the new headset and camera
and webcam.
Yep. Take care, guys.
Thanks, man.
Yep. See ya.
See ya.
Well, guys, as always, we appreciate you tuning in. And if you guys are interested in seeing what Spencer's doing, again, we urge you to check him out on Instagram and YouTube. His YouTube has a ton of informative videos. And by the sounds of it, with the new webcam, he's going to be putting together some business insights, which I think a lot of you guys will appreciate, especially these single proprietors or single man shows out there in that trade of finished carpentry and probably other trades related to that.
Yeah, for sure. Because I think that everyone, especially with him, everyone knows him for his processes on the carpentry end. So I think it'll be interesting to get a sneak peek into what he does on the business end and how he looks at these jobs.
Heck yeah. So always hit us up with a review on iTunes. What does Johnny say? 5 stars. 5 stars if you like it. 5-star I don't know.
If you don't like it.
If you don't like it, as a warning. Something along those lines. Sorry, John. I know you're going to listen to this. And we're sad John's not here this week. But we will see you guys next week. Take care.
Thank you.